Earlier today, I was looking for something on my computer, and I went down the rabbit hole of looking into old hard drives. And somewhere back there, I came across an article that I'd forgotten about. And if I start talking about different places I've been quoted, which pops up from time to time at parties, like I go to a lot of parties, I've mentioned before here, for instance, that I was on the BBC. In fact, I did a video about that, and I played a clip of me on the BBC. So I've also been on CNN. I've also been on a whole bunch of TV stations, radio stations. I've lost track of all those. But one of the cool things that I can also say is I've been quoted in the New York Times. Now, the New York Times has reviewed some of my books, as has the Wall Street Journal, which is pretty cool. But to be quoted as an expert in a major newspaper like the New York Times is actually a pretty big deal. And so this goes back, way back. I'm going to put it up on the screen so you can see it, but I'm not sure if what I put on the screen will be readable. But the New York Times, Monday, June 14th, 2004. And I vividly remember this because I was sitting in my office the week before, and someone called me and said, "Hi, I'm a reporter. I'm doing a story on classic car scams. Do you know anything about those?" I said, "Yeah, I've handled a whole bunch of those kind of cases." And the guy asked me some hypothetical questions, and he said, "Okay, I'm putting together this piece about what happens when people buy rare cars, like at auction or something. What happens if they're scammed?" So that was the focus of the article. So the article is entitled, "When Collectibles Gain Value, Ruses Become More Clever." And in there they give the example about how Craig Jackson of Barrett Jackson fame has a 1970 Plymouth Cuda convertible with a Hemi in it, and his is real. So it's worth a lot of money. Back then, a couple $1 million, possibly even more now. But he points out that it'd be very easy for someone just to get a Cuda, yank out the 318 and drop in a Hemi, and hey, you got a Hemi Cuda. But of course, numbers matching is important. And so, the question is, what happens if somebody did that to you? That is, they ripped you off. And I've encountered a bunch of these. I've represented people who've bought cars that were purported to be other than what they really were. For instance, Z28 fakes are fairly common these days. And there's a few others. Now, if you really are going to invest real money into a car like this, you need to have it inspected by somebody who knows what they're talking about. So they quote Galen Govier here, who, by the way, I've met him. He's a very nice guy. And he's, for instance, the Mopar guy. And so if he looks at your car and says, this is real and this is legit, or if he says it's not, you can take that to the bank because he's considered to be like the authority on that. And so here, for instance, it goes, Mr. Govier cites a case in which an enterprising Midwesterner produced 10 to 12 vehicle identification plates with authentic Hemi Cuda numbers and attached them to restorable cars. Now, the buyers may have known the cars were clones, said Govier, whose practice is located in Wisconsin, but subsequent owners may not be made aware. And so it's one of the things that you worry about when you hear that somebody's building replicas that are so good they look real. Someone can buy it and say, "Oh, I know it's a replica, don't worry about it." But then they sell it and pretend that they didn't know it was a replica. So in the little sub box here, it goes, when numbers don't add up, what recourse does a buyer have when a car sold as completely original turns out to be something less? Say, for example, that you bought a 1965 Shelby Mustang GT350 that the seller assured you is a matching numbers original, meaning its engine and body are the same ones it had when it left the factory. But at the first show you enter, a judge points out a half a dozen clues that the car is a fake. Steve Lehto, a Farmington Hills, Michigan lawyer who specializes in automotive law, says any aggrieved person can bring a fraud case under common law statutes. Buyers may have more protection if the seller was a dealer or auction house, Mr. Lehto said. And by the way, that's a convention of the New York Times. They refer to you the first time by full name, second time with a salutation. So I'm Mr. Lehto. Because consumer cases in most states can't be brought against individuals, only vendors actively involved in trade. So I can tell you right now that I've sued a dealer who sold a car, in fact, I've sued several, described it and said, this is what this is, including one where the guy said numbers matching, and it wasn't numbers matching. And we were successful in those lawsuits. And then it says, according to Martin Emerson, so apparently they called some other guy, a lawyer based in London who provides legal representation in the sale of collector cars, a vital issue in proving fraud is, of course, intent to deceive. In the case of the Shelby, one factor would be price. It was much higher than it would have been for an ordinary Mustang. Very likely the seller was deceived. Well, yeah, you'd think so. Evidence that the chassis or vehicle identification numbers were altered also strengthens the buyer's case, as would the seller's ad claiming the car has matching numbers. I think that's an example I gave him, but I could be wrong on that. Your chances of winning restitution are also greater if you have a written statement from the seller attesting to the car's provenance or history. And one of the things that I always tell people, you're going to buy a vehicle off the internet. It's described on the internet, I presume, right? You're not just buying it because you saw an image on the internet with nothing else attached to it. You always print out what you see on the internet. The number of times we've talked to people who said, yeah, I bought this car, I had a problem with it. I went back to find the guy's website, and the car's no longer there. He took it down when he sold it. So you print that out. So you have evidence of what the guy said originally, whether it's a guy who works for a dealership or a broker or just a guy. And so keep in mind that what I was getting at, and they didn't really give me as much column space as I wish they had, is that in the world of the sale of goods, there's often a distinction between professional sellers, that would be car dealers, car brokers, and so on, and the amateurs, that is just individuals, okay? You're driving on the street, you see a car in a driveway, and you stop, and you walk up and talk to the guy, and he goes, yeah, I bought this car a while back, it's a such and such. And you go, I love this car, I want to buy it from you. And you buy it from the guy, right? Well, you're not going to get a warranty of merchantability from that sale because the guy's not a merchant. So that goes out the window. You also can't go after the guy under like the Consumer Protection Act or the equivalent in many states because those only talk about merchants selling things to consumers. So in an individual sale, someone just selling you something, a lot of those types of statutes go out the window, but common law still covers you. Fraud and misrepresentation are two biggies. So fraud is where the guy outright actively lies to you and says something about the car that is absolutely, objectively false, okay? Misrepresentation is where the guy remains silent when he should have spoken. Best example of that is the guy is standing there and you're walking the car and you're like, oh my God, I've never seen a car in this shape. This is the best Survivor I've ever seen. And unbeknownst to you, the car was wrecked, pulled out of a junkyard, and restored really, really well. And the guy knows it because he's the one who did it. And when you say it's the best Survivor I've ever seen, the guy keeps his mouth shut. Now, if you can convince a jury or a court that the man should have spoken there because he knew that you were working on a mistaken belief and he didn't speak, that could rise to misrepresentation. Notice all the squirrely words I put in there because these are all proof issues. A jury might look at you and go, you're an idiot. What made you think it wasn't ever wrecked before, huh? But again, juries are juries. So the point is that fraud is the guy out and out lies to you about something, okay? So he goes, this is a numbers matching car. I know because I'm the original owner and I've babied it since day one. And it's a numbers matching car. And so you buy it from the guy. He signs a title over. You hand him the money. You drive off in your new car. And you discover that he's not the original owner. And it's not numbers matching. And the guy's only had it like a week. Okay? So he made a bunch of false statements to you. That would be fraud. Out and out false statements. But then the failure to speak. But the reason that this is important is that a lot of the statutes that allow you to sue somebody in a merchant setting also allow you to get your attorney fees back. In a typical case where you sue an individual, you got to pay your own attorney fees in America. It's called the American rule. So there you are. So somebody rips you off for $10,000, hire an attorney, probably cost you $5,000 to $10,000 to get that case to a trial. You win, you break even. You don't win, you lose. In fact, if you win, you still might lose. It might cost more than $10,000. So there's a certain gray area where it's not even worth pursuing except as a matter of principle. Or you might be able to sue a small claims court. But the thing is that now, with the collectible cars rising so much in price, because keep in mind that car that Mr. Jackson's got there, that's worth $2 million 20 years ago, and probably worth 5 to 10 now, okay? Brand new cost about $4,000. And now, there's a period of time where you could have bought that car for less. You could have bought that car for less. But prices drop, and all of a sudden, woo, they skyrocket. And with that going on, you've got all kinds of stories. And I mean, I've heard all kinds of stories where people said they bought something in an auction, it was presented as this, turns out it was this. And the question, of course, is whether you can sue the auction house, because a lot of auction houses say if you bid, you're also going to waive your right to come after us because we don't vouch for any of this stuff. We're just passing along what we were told by the consignor. So if they brought it to us and they said it's numbers matching original one owner, if we put that in the description, it's only because they told it to us. It's not because we're vouching for that. We didn't check. So that's another concern also. But there are some auction houses that have got reputations as to doing more work about getting reputable cars in there than other auction houses. So there's that also. But the cool part is that when I put together my resume or I'm talking to people and they say, oh, what makes you think you know what you're talking about? I say, well, I've been doing this for 33 years. I've written a couple books on some of these topics. And also I've been quoted by the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And I've been on the BBC and CNN and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's why. So again, Steve Lehto at the time, a Farmington Hills, Michigan lawyer who specializes in automotive law. And again, keep in mind, that was 20 years ago. So there you go. Questions or comments, put them below those. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.